intersection of electric vehicles in the grid. And so what my startup WeaveGrid does is we work on enabling large-scale grid integration, as it's known, of electric vehicles. So as you add more and more EVs onto the grid, how can you ensure that the EVs don't cause the grid to have problems, or even better yet, turn it into a massively valuable grid resource? So it's been a ton of fun. We're based out of San Francisco, and yeah, I've been growing quickly, and happy to share more about it later.
Okay, I think I was next. So I'm Elisa Maciá Donovan. I'm at the Katy Prairie Conservancy. I am a 1992 graduate of Rice. I was a material science and engineering major, or MISCI, as we called ourselves then. Now, you know, it's some kind of sexier nano engineering, which was invented while I was there. I'm not that old. But anyways, I went straight from my engineering degree to law school, and from there did kind of a traditional corporate energy legal practice for a while. And you know, my engineering degree, I think, was helpful in a lot of ways. I represented some tech kind of chemical companies, and you know, worked on some licensing and that kind of thing. But I was always drawn to land conservation, and finally made that career switch about 4 years ago. Did some volunteer work and got involved with some organizations and made that a permanent career switch. And now at the Katy Prairie Conservancy, I do not only legal work, but also project management. And we are, you know, land conservation primarily. We're a nonprofit, but we do work a lot with engineers. We're very active actually with the Rice Speed Center, doing a lot of flood mitigation planning and hydrological modeling of the Katy Prairie, and you know, some of the proposed infrastructure projects that are being reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers for some of the flooding issues. I personally serve on the San Jacinto Watershed Regional Flood Planning Group, where we're tasked by the state of Texas to come up with a state flood plan, and you know, some of the you know, projects there. So it's a pretty different kind of job, and look forward to talking with you.
I think I'm next. My name's Jim Pike. I'm Lovett, class of 1997. I studied math and mechanical engineering. I'm currently work for myself as a consultant. Previously, I've worked a lot in professional services, both as an investment banker and as a consultant for McKinsey & Company. I also have some operating experience. I was one of the executives who started up Quanta Renewable Energy Services, which was a commercial and utility scale solar engineering, procurement, construction company. We designed and developed some of the largest projects back around 2010. As I said, I currently work for myself as a consultant, and in this role, I leverage a lot of my previous experience. I work on a range of projects advising private equity firms as well as companies. One of my current projects is working with a modular home manufacturer who's looking at installing solar as an energy source in a proposed factory that they're going to build. And I'm also working on several due diligence projects in the solar energy space.
Okay, and I'm Charlos Ward. I am also a Lovetteer, 98. I have a degree in chemical engineering as well as a BA in economics. BP sent me back to Rice, and I also have an MBA from the General School in 06. My current role at BP is being involved actually with new technologies associated with transitioning from a hydrogen economy to a renewable economy. And so that involves everything from renewable energy to new devices that can run on renewable energy or hydrogen energy.
Thank you. So sustainability can mean different things to different people. So in the context of your current work, how would you define sustainability? Jim,
Who wants to take that one?
I'll start. I think you can think sustainability in a very broad terms if you want. And you can say, is the current economy, is it sustainable? And I think you can have it include anything from social aspects all the way through environmental aspects. For me personally, most of my work is focused around renewable energy, and the emphasis is around decarbonization. And so whether you're thinking of installing solar or transitioning from carbon-based fuels to hydrogen, those are the topics that I focus on most. And that's actually what comes to my mind when I think about sustainability, but there's definitely a broad definition.
And I'll pipe in. So I agree, you know, carbon and how we use the resources that we have in a way that's going to sustain our world for, you know, future generations. And, you know, from my perspective at a land trust, it's about a lot of the issues are development and land use. And it's interesting because I have a slightly, you know, we look at wind and solar and the use of land and how it might impact migrating birds and habitat. So I think you have to look at, you know, at it from multiple standpoints. I mean, clearly oil and gas infrastructure is also a land use issue. And so looking at all of the costs and making sure that whatever resource we are using is to make sure that it's not being used in a way that is depleting an infinite resource and is not going to sustain you know, our world and our earth that, you know, our kids, grandkids, great grandkids are going to inherit from us. And so we need to look, you know, carbon is clearly a big issue and climate change has to be handled. And so how can we, you know, do that? But let's also look at what are we doing to support our local wildlife, you know, local agriculture so that we have food for our people to eat. You know, we can't pave over every last, you know, blade of grass or field or rangeland that exists in our world. What spaces are going to be left for recreation? How do we maintain water quality? You know, using natural systems, you know, as well as engineered systems. Air quality is an issue. So I think, you know, look at the whole picture is my view of sustainability.
Yeah, I'll build on that. Within BP, and I know a number of our clients, we basically say if it's good for the environment, it's good for the community, and it's good for the company's bottom line. If it achieves all three, then that solution is sustainable. And so, you know, when I work with corporations and governments to create sustainable solutions, for example, what we're doing right now with the city of Houston and their climate action plan, you know, it's not only looking at implementing new projects to bring on, you know, solar energy, wind energy, green hydrogen, but it's also working with the community to ensure that these projects actually benefit the community, leads to new jobs, enhances, you know, property values. And then, you know, there's also education and advocacy. So again, sustainability, it's not just the environment piece, but it's the community piece, and it's the company bottom.
Yeah, I think I'll probably say something that's a little more off the beat here, which is that let's be careful about the word sustainability is probably my take. I think the term can be very broad ranging, and I think my advice to y'all as students is to probably pick the part of the broader landscape that appeals the most to you. I think Elisa and Charlos brought up really great points on like how that can mean very different things in their specific jobs. And I think you have to be very cautious to not let the term be blanket and something that is actually meaningless. And in fact, actually it is having some sort of real impact, because there are too many folks who are starting to just use the word sustainability for this and sustainability for that. The reality is, like, in my view and the way that I look at that term, and I actually am very narrow-minded in the way I look at how we create impact. It's really around climate, but that doesn't mean that has to be your take, as Elisa said very rightly. But I also don't think that like that one term can actually be a one-size-fits-all solution for everything. I don't think the same entity is going to often be a player that can solve land use and climate and water and everything and, you know, low income communities and all of that. And I think it tends to actually become a very, it tends to lose its meaning if you stretch it out too much. So I would caution you as you're looking for careers in it to really kind of think about what is the aspect, you know, do almost like a market segmentation. Like, what is the aspect of sustainability that draws me in the most? Do I care about coastal reclamation? Do I care about you know, clean energy? Do I care about transportation solutions? Do I care about helping marginalized communities have equitable access to clean energy, clean water, all of those things? Because each of those has a very different meaning. And I think we have to be careful not to let the blanket term sustainability not actually have any meaning left. Sorry, my hot take for the day to start off this panel.
Thank you for all of those different responses and your takes on sustainability. So 2 weeks ago, Texas definitely went through a rough patch with power outages and water supply failures. So how would a greater focus on sustainability have had an impact on the situation throughout Texas? Charlos, would you like to go first?
I can. I mean, I think one of the things worth noting is prior to the extreme weather event, the city had stood up its climate action plan under its chief sustainability officer, as well as a citywide resiliency strategy under chief resilience officer. And so there's a recognition that resiliency and climate action go hand in hand. We can't have one without the other. And in order for us to be more resilient for the long term, we have to deal with climate and minimize future extreme weather events. So, you know, as we continue to address the climate issue, the expectation is that we won't be having a once in 100-year flood, a once in 100-year, you know, snowstorm almost every year.
Yeah, I would add, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think one of the things that I love the most about my time at Rice, and I think it comes up in this question around broader sustainability, is the ability to think about systems, right? We are interconnected systems. Our energy supply, our you know, our water infrastructure, obviously, that is fed by said energy supply, and vice versa. I mean, these are interconnected in and of themselves. Our ability to have access to Zoom, the ability to do anything, these are all interconnected systems. And as you put any system under a lot of strain, what ends up happening is that you notice the brittleness in parts of it, and you also realize where they are less resilient. I mean, the concept of resiliency and talking about climate resiliency or just general, you know, systems resiliency is saying that it is, you know, we are undergoing large system level changes through things like climate change, through, you know, huge amounts of urbanization, through huge amounts of deforestation, all of that. And as those massive, like, global level systems change, what happens to the human systems that we've built up? That's all a very long way of saying snowstorms, exactly as Charlotte said, snowstorms are going to keep hitting us. Like, we're going to keep getting this again and again. And we don't have a resilient system today. And like the way that ERCOT is designed, and I'm an expert in power markets, but like the way that ERCOT is designed and built and maintained, yeah, there are a lot of things that any of us could have called that like, this isn't going to work when these things happen more frequently. And then of course, the knock-on effects from there are also somewhat predictable. So yeah, we need to start building in resiliency into all of our planning and our engineering and our thinking. That's what we have to think about.
And I think the storm highlights some of the challenges that you see even within the ERCOT system when you look at Texas as being its own grid. Decisions that were made in the past are those questions that people will want to revisit. Being isolated within the grid is extremely challenging because you don't have access to power that might be produced in the eastern United States or in the western United States. The US is covered by 3 grids, east, west, and Texas, basically. I think to the point of sustainability, I think it really highlights the undergoing climate change. People look at the data for how cold it was in February, and I went back and looked at the last 40 years because there have been cold days in 2011, and 89, and 83. And one of the challenges that happened when you looked in this last February is it was uniformly cold across all of ERCOT. And so when you think of just the grid itself, there weren't any parts that were really able to operate at the level you might have expected them to support the rest of the grid. So it was uniformly challenged. If you look very specifically, February 15th and February 16th were basically 2 of the 5 coldest days in all of Texas in the last 40 some years. So it's an unprecedented event. And then when you frame the data, you've actually been seeing fewer cold days over the last 40 years. It's trended down as average temperatures have trended up. So I think it really highlights the challenge that we're facing. And I think Apoorv's point about resiliency and building in the systems to deal with these adverse weather conditions will be really critical going forward.
So let's now try discuss a little bit about your career and how you got to where you're at. So was there a decision process that you went through to get to your current role? That is, did you plan your career at all? Did you see yourself doing the work that you've done when you were in school or after you graduated school, or did you just follow opportunities as they knocked at your door? Elisa, would you like to go first?
Sure. I would say I was stumbling along. I knew when I was in high school, I liked chemistry and math. So I was like, oh, I'll be a chemical engineer. And then I was like, well, that's maybe not my thing. This whole material science seems like a cool cutting edge technology. But then when I had some great internships, I went and spent time, at one of the Rice labs. And then I had this, thing down in NASA where I was working on space shuttle. I was like, this is as high tech as it gets. And I'm really just not interested in being in this kind of, research setting. I just realized for me personally, that wasn't how I wanted to spend, the rest of my career. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to law school. And I was inspired by Jim Blackburn, who was a great professor. And I was like, I'm going to save the world and do probably what I'm doing today. But after law school, I was like, I've got a lot of debt and I need to pay a bunch of debt. So I went to corporate law and I was working for energy companies and doing, stuff completely different. I worked for, the chemical frackers of the world. I mean, and they're good people. I have no problem with the oil field industry and, chemical, but it wasn't what called my heart. I always like, this isn't really what I meant to do. And so I finally, many, many, many years later, after just talking about it or thinking about it, took action. So I can't say I knew what I would be doing. And I would say all of those experiences and jobs, the engineering degree as a lawyer was valuable. People that I interacted with, my clients were like, oh, you've got an engineering degree from Rice. You're not just some, I don't know, someone that doesn't get me. You kind of get it. And then today at a nonprofit, having been in the corporate world and, worked with clients and just understanding how business transactions are put together and financing and what we do, even though we're a nonprofit, it is some pretty, there's some pretty big kind of financial transactions and they're complicated and you put it all together and we have to work with government agencies and especially this political advocacy stuff is new to me, but it's all exciting. So for me, while my heart told me what I wanted to do many, many years ago, I failed to listen until later in my career. And that's okay. I feel like there are still opportunities, as you move along and just take, the knowledge and what's in the opportunities in front of you and, make your best choice and go from there. At least that was my strategy. I'm sure there is a better, more direct way, to get where you want to be, but.
I can go. at no point in time could I have imagined that, I would have an opportunity to live all over the world and work on some of the, serial #1 mega projects that I worked on. But what I can say that has been consistent is that I've found opportunities, I've created opportunities. I even the role I have today, right? I was sitting at home and I saw an announcement, and I called the vice president, one of our SVPs, and said, "Hey, this is how I can help you." And that led to a role. And a lot of times, it's amazing what you can create for yourself if you just are willing to have a conversation with someone and put forward your value proposition.
So what advice would you have for individuals students who are trying to decide what career path they would like to take on?
I think that's of course a tricky question. For some people, they know exactly what they want to do and they can pursue that. I think to the previous question for myself, it's been looking at different options. And I think that's an important thing as you look at your career path. The reality is 15 years from now, there's going to be very different sets of opportunities and challenges than there are today. And so to me, it's always been how do you build optionality into your career path and keep certain options open. I understand that it's a challenging time right now, and people on this call, we've been through 2008 with the Great Recession was a challenging time. I came out of business school in 2003 post 9/11, and that was a challenging time. So there's ups and downs in your career, and getting the right choice right out of the starting gate isn't actually that critical. I came out from business school in 2003. It was a tough economy, but a lot of my classmates would transition after a year or 2 years. By 2005, 2006, the economy was doing great and there were lots of opportunities. And so if you don't get your first pick of the situation you want to be in and the job you want, there's opportunities to transfer later. You can use professional school to pivot. So when you think of then other ways to build options, I think there's a lot of value in networking and reaching out to alums and talking to them and understanding their different career paths and using that to inform you about things you might be interested in doing. I think one of my experiences going through school is I didn't appreciate how willing I think alums are open to helping students. And as I said, we've been through challenging times. We've seen downturns in the economy and disruptions in industries. And we certainly want to see Rice students succeed and do well. And so people will be open to sharing perspectives and thoughts and ideas. And so it's a reaching out. And I think the one thought there is if you send like one person one email, you might get a response, you might not get a response. But possibly it's because they didn't see your email, they saw it, they wanted to respond, they forgot, something happened, it went into a different folder, who knows? So when you reach out to someone, you can reach out 3-4 times without having a response, and that's still, appropriate. After a certain point, you should probably stop, but trying more than once, more than twice, 3 or 4 times is certainly okay to do that. And then reaching out to a large number of people. If you reach out to say 25 people, I'm sure you'll hear back from a decent number of people and be able to get some thoughts. So reaching out and leveraging the networks that you're part of is an important idea to develop perspectives on what you might want to do.
Yeah, I'd agree. Go ahead, Leon.
No, it's fine. You can.
I was just going to blend together a couple of the questions here because I think there was something in graduate degrees that you were about to ask us about. Is that right? Oh, yeah. Anyway, I was gonna just say like one very good piece of advice I got early on was you're going to have many careers, not many jobs, but many careers. And I know, there was this dream of, there was probably a dream back in the day, you go work your 40 years at some company and then that's it, you kind of retire, get your pension. That's not the modern economy. Don't think about your jobs that way. Like sometimes it is the case, but it increasingly is not. And I think it's a great thing that people do have the opportunity to pivot in both internally inside a company or outside. And I think there are going to be career evolutions that you will go through. But as you're thinking about, I love Jim's advice on like thinking about graduate school as one option of course, being able to pivot. I also just think that as you're thinking about what career path to take today, think about a combination of the skills that you have. Some of you will have deep, relatively deep, of course, you're often coming straight out of undergrad or maybe at a grad school, but like some amount of domain knowledge. So you'll be really good at doing, I don't know, material science or writing really well or whatever. And then some of you will just be functionally very good. So you'll be excellent at project management. You'll be really, really great at being a good leader. You'll be somebody who's actually much better at just being an individual contributor and just knocking things out one after another. If you kind of view yourself as a combination of your domain skills and your functional skills, it allows you to start looking for roles where you can say, look, I've never done a thing before. I've never done this thing before, but I know how it works conceptually. And I think just kind of looking at some of the questions that Leanne has here for us, I think that's frankly one of the most valuable things that Rice taught me was really recognizing and embracing the skills and knowledge that I developed and teaching me how to think and saying, look, I understand how to think about, and I see Dr. Wong here. So like, he knows me very well from my undergrad days, but like, even if you're a chemical engineer, for example, and you're used to designing and talking about unit ops and refineries, it's not that different from thinking about any other large scale system. It's really the same thing. And it's about taking what you know and being able to translate it into the new language. So I actually do kind of think of it as learning a new language. It's like the words are the same. It's just you got to know what it sounds like in German or in English. And so being able to take some of your skills from, let's say, learning a lot about unit ops in oil and gas, but being able to translate that to how a hydrogen facility works, it's more or less the same thing. So that's just some extra advice there, I guess.
So we have a question from the audience. And the question is, how does your work help with climate justice, in particular addressing social inequality?
I can speak a little bit. I mean, we're a land trust and we're mostly focused out on kind of the western edge of Houston, north of Katy, but we have land holdings that we're expanding forever. And as an organization, we're, the idea of climate justice, like I have to say I was somewhat ignorant until our organization became a part of CEER, which is the Coalition for Equity, the Environment and Resilience. And we've been really active in them since the founding, because they're really trying to bring together not just environmental organizations, but we have like a voting rights group, we have housing, we have just all kind of community organizers that are very interested in especially environmental justice issues and the historic policies that have landed polluters just always seem to be next to low income communities that affect people of different colors. And how are we coming to terms with that? And and even as we do this regional flood planning, you hear the voices that are very powerful, that are the homes that are more expensive, that have flooded, and they are screaming to their legislature. They have lawyers and they've got people and they've got a lot of resources, but then there's plenty of communities that are suffering worse impacts that have never gotten the same level of investment in their community. And it's really interesting to see, especially here in Harris County, where we now have a different commissioner's court and the voice of equity. And that is really something that I think our city and Harris County, they recognize this is an issue and they are taking action. And I think it's long time coming, and I think it's hard for people to hear if this hasn't been on their radar, but to recognize that yes, projects and public investment you need to do this in a way that's equitable, and it might not be to the benefit of the people that have had, this sort of disproportionate power, and, that's just the way it is. So, so with our work, we support land conservation. And so that, how can we, promote sort of natural solutions like some of the park, green spaces that have community benefits, within a community, so that there's a place to recreate. There's, sort of a nice place to go and, take a walk on the bayou, and it's not an eyesore. And how can we make sure that the water quality in all neighborhoods are nice, and, those kinds of projects that can be, implemented in a way in which communities actually want them, so that we're not citing the wastewater treatment plant in, one neighborhood that just seems to always have all the, the bad kind of industrial type projects. So, so I see it. I don't know, we're trying and we're actively participating, but it's going to come down to resources and money, and where will those projects get built? And I think, our elected officials are definitely taking some steps to listen. So that's good.
Building on that, if you have an opportunity to actually read some of the sustainability plans coming out of the city, they do talk about those three intersections, where it's benefiting the environment, benefiting the community, and economic. And so when you look at Sunnyside Solar, this is a community that historically has had refuge dumped into the community, creating emissions, lowering property value. The city is working with industry to put capital into that neighborhood and, create a solar project that not only is really a remediation and beautification project, but also provides low cost energy to the local residents. And so, like I said, BP is partnering with the city to make sure that whatever solution we come up with meets those three criteria.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions from students. One question is, what are the backgrounds and skill sets needed within the sustainability ecosystem nowadays?
I think there's certainly a lot of different backgrounds and skill sets that are required and valuable. And so everything from, if you think about it, data analytics to solving analytical problems. If you think of advocacy and promotion, those would require marketing skills and perspectives of how do you message and how do you communicate a vision. If you think about regulatory policy, what are the legal aspects, and what's the economics there to think about developing the right policies. So I think a broad set of skills will be critically valuable across, back to Apoorv's point of thinking of sustainability as a portfolio of different segments to any one of those segments. So when I look to the future, I do think kind of the data analysis skills and AI and machine learning and some of those aspects will be critically important.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I mean, the way I kind of view it is just that, again, it goes back to the point of like, what is sustainability? And I think there is a very important question that needs to be resolved, which is that if we need to continue existing as a human species on this planet, then we need to be doing a better job of maintaining a sustainable environment. And so I don't view any kind of climate work as something that is only directed towards the environment. I think it's directed towards sustaining an economy, frankly. And so as you think about these terms that are being thrown around, the new energy economy, transitioning the energy system, blah, 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 anything that exists in a modern economy, any functional area that is needed to make those things work is going to be needed. And so whether you're doing marketing for an oil company or whether you're doing marketing for a solar company, it's still going to be needed, right? Like those same skills and functions that get you excited, get you out of bed, that you want to be doing, are the things that are going to be needed in this new economy. It's just a question of, is it something that's inherently making the world a more sustainable place or not? That's the way I kind of think about it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think any skill, I mean, people, that we need app developers, we need website people, we need, community, organizers, we need, finance people are huge. I mean, I think, everyone needs a good accountant, and I know these are probably, engineers that are listening in on this, but I mean, there's a whole range of, hydrologists or, all areas of science and, research to collect data, but then also to implement, as Apoorv was saying. So I think whatever your passion is, your skill set can intersect with a sustainability career in a different way. So
let me add one more thought here, because there might be a similar question is what skill set should I be looking to build or develop? And I think as you go throughout your careers, you'll be, it'll be important to keep learning, keep reskilling. I have a classmate of mine who's gone back to get a comp sci degree, and he's my age, which is about 45. So education will be a lifelong process, and it's about building up your skills. But as we talk about planning your career, I think there's an important notion of opportunities and where to go. I think working with great people is something that's really important. And so when you evaluate opportunities, you can think about who are the people I'm going to be working with, and do I like those people, and am I excited to work with them to solve these challenging problems? And then so when you ask the skill question, if you're working with a team of people, you don't have to be, and most likely you won't be, the expert at everything, but rather working with a team of people who bring these different skills together to solve problems. You might be the person who contributes to data analytics solution. You might be the person who's the kind of the glue and the leader that pulls it all together. You might be the person who can message and communicate and explain the mission of the company, or bring people on to sell the vision to get people converted to your ideas. And all of these skills are important, but you don't have to bring everything. It's finding a team to work with that you like and enjoy working with, and having those people kind of round out where you don't have the same strengths. So I think that's a really important concept as you go through your careers and as you think of jobs. It's not what industry you're in, it's not what company you're working for. There's a big importance on the people you'll be working with.
We have another question from the audience, and this question is about Starlink, or in other words, new technologies which allow people to live in rural or off-grid locations, but still maintain their presence, their online presence, or be able to carry out remote work. Do you see a future for higher reliability goods, that is, engineering that lasts instead of engineering to make warranty?
What I'm seeing in my line of work is engineering for circular economy. So less and less of a product where you buy the product and you own the product, and when you're done with the product, or there's a version out, you chunk it in the trash and it ends up in a landfill. I'm seeing more and more of product as a service, which means you effectively are leasing it. And at the end, you turn it in, you get the newer model, and the company who takes it from you is responsible for fully recycling that product. So it really moves away from, designing a product that is, planned obsolescence, right? Where you're expecting it to be replaced and chunked and buy a new one, but more about a zero waste product that, you know, from every component is meant to be recycled.
Yeah, and are you okay if I answer one of the other questions that I think Zoom has gone ahead and said answered, but I'd love to actually talk out loud? The policy one.
Please go ahead.
So there was this question from, I think, Aaron, just asking about the nature of the policy-driven nature of the energy industry. I mean, I think you're totally right. As I said in my sort of verbal or my written response, I often love this question because a lot of Rice alumni, even though we have access to the Baker Institute and the resources there, often don't think about, you know, our impact and our ability to craft the policy that goes around it. But I will tell you, I mean, there is no doubt that energy, climate, you know, I think broader sustainability, everything necessitates, especially when you're making a market transition of this kind, it necessitates guiding policy so that the market knows what direction to take. Right? It's very difficult to go from steady state 1 to steady state 2 if you don't have a sort of a pathway that's kind of charted out a little bit, or at least guideposts provided by policy. And so I view policy as a very necessary kind of thing that you have to engage in. If you're a technology producer and you don't engage in policy, you're making a mistake. If you are a business and you don't understand the policy implications for your business, you're making a mistake. And so I think policy is a super, super important thing to be active in. Now that can take different forms, whether that's, you know, for us, we work with utilities, so we're often engaging at the state level, Public Utilities Commission and so forth. But for, you know, for other folks, it's often going up to the federal level and saying, okay, look, like think about the new kind of technologies, getting bills passed and so forth, educating legislators. Remember, at the end of the day, policymakers are there because they're trying to hopefully help craft the way that policy is written and delivered, but they're not experts in these topics. And so if you are that expert, it is your job to be active and let them know what the right way forward is. So I absolutely love that question there.
So we have time for a couple more questions. So one question is, what are some of the ways students can gain a competitive edge in the industry while at Rice?
I would definitely say get involved. I think, well, I hope Dr. is going to talk a bit about what's going on at Rice, but I do believe students have an opportunity to, you know, make their resume more competitive by getting involved in the various Rice initiatives around sustainability. And that goes throughout the university. I mean, from the Kinder Institute to the Baker Institute to School of Social Science that are doing actual policy studies, to the engineering department, which I think is the most exciting, you know, looking at hydrogen energy and, you know, getting rid of, you know, materials that are hard to decompose, et cetera. So definitely take advantage of all of the activities that are in your own backyard.
I think I would add to that, certainly reach out to alums, reach out to others and ask for informational interviews to spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes with someone based on being interested in an industry or a company or something they're doing and trying to learn more. And I think this gives you firsthand knowledge. It helps you build a network, and it serves that valuable purpose for just simply knowing more people and being aware of what's happening in your area of interest. I think there's no substitute for that. People are generally willing to give you 15, 20 minutes, and you can learn a lot in a short period of time.
Agree. You don't know what you don't know, you know, and so the only way to get an idea of what else might be out there is just, you know, curiosity and, you know, a little bit of boldness and risk taking. Go ahead and introduce yourself to somebody that, you know, speaks at an event, or, you know, I know Rice offers those externships, and we've hosted a couple students where it's just, a couple days, but it was enough for us to get to know those students so they could learn about us. And, we're happy to refer them out to other organizations, or, I know a lot of people. I've been around for a while, and so maybe I'm not the person that you want to, connect with, but I could probably figure out who you might want to connect with if you come talk to me. So, it's that kind of, it takes a little courage, but it's worth it.
I think we can squeeze in one more question from the audience. So I'm going to be combining two questions. So when you think of sustainability, what type of opportunities are available as it relates to botany and agriculture? And then what kind of opportunities are available for biomedical engineers interested in sustainable product development?
I think on the botany and agricultural, if I think of agriculture, there's of course a huge aspect of water conservation. And there's a lot of AI being developed around how do we most efficiently deliver water to crop fields to ensure less waste, to ensure the plant absorbs as much water as possible, and also to simply consume less energy in moving that water. So I have a former colleague of mine who does several ag startups and has been in this space, and that's sort of one of the things they've been working on.
Yeah, and we are trying to be a voluntary carbon offset market with land conservation, and there's all these new protocols that people are developing. And can you take some degraded grassland and restore it, where you put in more native vegetation, you graze it in a way where it's intense, but then you let it rest for a long time, and that really stimulates the root growth and pulls a lot more carbon into the soil, because most of the carbon is actually in the soil. It's not in the vegetation itself. And so there's it's agriculture, but it's also carbon sequestration. And, it's a new area. And actually, Jim Blackburn is working on a couple of voluntary protocols as we speak. And they need people to understand what that is. And he's trying to do a measurement-based one. So you actually need to have instruments that you insert into the soil and measure, well, what's your carbon now? And then if you do these practices, what is it, after a couple years of this sort of improved management practice? And there's, I think it's a super exciting field, and agriculture is, a lot of our land use in this country, and internationally. And so if we can figure out a way to manage the land in a way that actually sequesters more carbon, that could be hugely impactful for the climate. It's there's more carbon in the soil than there is, in the air. And so can we, continue to pull it down, and agriculture can certainly be a part of that.
Yeah, and just adding on to that point, I mean, the agriculture is also, as much as we want it to also be a form of carbon sequestration, it is also one of the largest carbon sources today, between farming and raising and all these different approaches. And so ways that we can either find technological solutions or natural or naturally enhanced solutions, as I sometimes call them. There's a whole bunch of different approaches that people are trying to take. And I think of the botany and agriculture part as being a super critical foundational understanding of the problem, and then as bioengineering as sort of being one of the things you can potentially use to try and enhance and almost like sort of engineer your way out of it. So it's actually one of the most exciting spaces, I would say, right now, which is what can we do? Everything from impossible foods and beyond meat. I mean, that's essentially a way to try and tackle agriculture, but to other creative solutions. I know BP is an investor in a couple of companies that are actually trying to do sort of almost, I think it's carbon sequestered that goes to fish feed or something like that. So there's a whole bunch of different approaches that people are trying to tackle. And I actually think biologically engineered systems tend to be the most behind technologically right now. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
So I'll say that sustainability in agriculture you can approach, as the panelists have said, from many different angles. From, how do we address food scarcity given population growth? How do we make food sustainable without, as Apoorv said, being more damaging to the environment? To carbon sequestration, using the land to sequester carbon through a number of reforestation and other type of initiatives. And then also, BP within Brazil, BP Bunge is the leading producer of biofuels. So it's using sugarcane instead of a hydrocarbon as the feedstock for creating fuel. So there's so many directions you can go with agriculture and sustainability.
Well, thank you, panelists, for this wonderful discussion. You were able to share some of your knowledge, experience, and you also were able to give us advice on how to pursue a career in sustainability. Now, would Dr. Wong like to share something to close?
Hi, Leanne. Thank you for organizing this panel, and greetings to the panelists. It's wonderful to hear your wonderful thoughts and insights, and I want to say hello to all our future alums that's attending in whatever time zone that you're in. Wonderful questions to really build on the question of what is sustainability and what can engineers do to address that problem. I'll say maybe make a couple of points here. And the first one I think is that, the way we live as a society is unsustainable. That's a huge problem, isn't it? Okay? We as engineers, we are trained to be problem solvers. Okay? But I don't expect engineers to solve that problem. It's a huge problem, okay, of unsustainable living, you might say. So I think it goes to a point made earlier, I think Apoorv and others made this, which is engineers really should work closely with non-engineers to create a more holistic solution, to tackle the problem. That's one point. A second point is, what is the definition of sustainability? So maybe from a technologist perspective, I'll define sustainability very briefly as, the principle of using our natural resources for positive effect today without negative effect tomorrow, okay? And how does that boil down to a chemical engineer? Well, I think about natural resources and turning natural resources to make the materials and energy, and as a discipline, and for the chubby department here at Rice, we're trying to think about the traditional natural resources, which is oil and gas and coal. What can we do to step beyond that? So we're looking at water. When I say we, the community of chemical engineers, let's look at sunlight. Let's look at wind. Let's look at the CO2 that's already in the air. Can we go ahead and pull it back out and turn that into perhaps new materials? Okay. Can we extract energy from water using sunlight? So all these questions are starting to come up again. And I think that really reflects the changing world that we live in today, where the negative effects is not the immediate negative effects, it's the longer term effects. And I think that's changing the chemical engineering discipline irreversibly. So the last point I'll make is to the students, that are on the line, and to future students, if you're at Rice, think about how to address the question, what can you do to create that, the set of skills, or to be better prepared for a career in sustainability. And whether you're a chemical engineer or mechanical or materials engineer, my advice is the following: think orthogonally. What does that mean? What I mean by that is whatever engineering major you decide to choose, think about taking a class or pursue a passion that's outside of your home discipline. Think differently, right? Think unconventionally. Think so non-chemical engineering that it just almost makes no sense. But that's part of your growth here, because down the road, whether it's 5 years, 1 year, 10 years from when you graduate, you're going to realize, you know what, maybe I'm not so interested in chemical engineering anymore, but boy, that class I took in oh, I don't know, in business school, or, you know, maybe a class in the humanities, or something that's so outside your field, maybe you're going to pull that back in. And so I think that is some of the training that can be helpful to think orthogonally. And I think that's by doing that and getting an education from Rice. I mean, what better place to help the energy industry take that baby steps, but also the big transformational steps to go from an unsustainable way of managing our natural resources to a sustainable way. What better place to do that than in Houston? So a couple of comments, but hopefully maybe that helps to kind of connect the dots a little bit, but also to give you my perspective as a faculty member in the Chubby department. And when I don't teach, you know, when I'm department chair. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for sharing with us. Let me, pull up this slide.
Dr. Wong, I definitely, by the way, use my Chubby degree even in a completely non-chemical engineering approach.
That's right.
To all of the students and participants out there, if you still haven't had any of your questions answered, or if you would like to connect with me or any of the panelists, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. Also, we would be having another panel coming up. We will be discussing about careers in the aerospace industry on April 9th at 4 p.m. We will be having the CEO of Virgin Galactic, Michael Colglazier, talking to us. So if that is something that interests you, please do not miss this opportunity.
Hey, can I just say something? Hi, everybody. Nicole Vanden Heuvel, Center for Career Development. I just want to thank Charlos. Thank you, Charlos, so much for organizing this. And Leanne, thank you so much for being such a great moderator and panelist. Thank you so much. Really, you offered such great advice and perspective, which is so important for our students to hear, particularly connect with that alumni network. Look how everybody's so willing to help out and be willing to articulate what your skill sets are. I've already connected with some of you guys on LinkedIn, so look forward to getting to know you guys better. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to our students.
Finally, before we close, I request all of our participants to fill out the short survey that would appear at the end of the webinar. We really value your feedback, and it will help us improve future events. So thank you and have a good evening.